he had been sleeping on the same piece of cardboard for 19 nights when his son walked past him without stopping. Not in a crowd, not at a distance. 3 feet of open pavement between them on Bordeaux Road in Lagos on a Thursday afternoon at 2:17 p.m., clear sky, no obstruction. His son had looked directly at his face for 1 full second. Then he had looked away and kept walking, adjusting the watch on his wrist as he went. His son was 31 years old. He had raised him in that house. He had taught him, at age 9, to look at every person he passed on the street. Every person. The driver, the gateman, the woman selling groundnut at the corner, and acknowledge their humanity with at least a nod. He had said it so many times it had become a family instruction, a rule so ingrained that his children had grown up not realizing it was a rule at all. His son nodded at no one on Bordeaux Road that Thursday. He walked to a black Mercedes that was idling 30 meters ahead, got in, and closed the door. Emeka Chukwuemeka Okafor sat on the cardboard. He did not move for a long time. He did not know yet what the next 11 days would cost him. But the person sitting on that cardboard, in the soiled agbada that had once been ivory and was now a gray-brown approximation of its original color, already understood that the experiment had given him something he had not planned to receive. His full name was Chief Emeka Chukwuemeka Okafor, and he was 61 years old and had weighed, at the start of this, 89 kilograms. He could not say with precision what he weighed on the 19th day. He estimated less. Hunger works slowly, and then all at once, and by the second week he had understood, with the particular clarity of a man who had never once had to understand it before, that the body treats food as a problem when food is certain, and treats it as a clock when it is not. He had built Okafor Group from a single import license he had been granted in 1991 and a borrowed 40,000 naira that he had repaid in full inside 18 months. The company now employed 2,300 people across 6 states. He had been the subject of 3 magazine profiles in the previous 2 years, in each of which he had described his values. The word he used was always values. Not business principles, not philosophy, values, with precision and apparent sincerity. In one of those profiles he had said, "I have never lost sight of where I came from. I believe that is the thing that keeps a man honest." He had said it and believed it, and had gone home that evening to his 6-bedroom house on Banana Island and eaten a dinner his chef had prepared, and watched the news in a chair that had cost more than most Nigerians earned in a year, and had not once noticed the distance between the sentence and the life. The idea came to him after the profile was published. Not immediately. It settled on him over several weeks, the way a discomfort settles, first as a minor irritant, then as something that won't be ignored. He had been reading a letter from his foundation, a quarterly report showing 847 beneficiaries served across 3 programs, and he had felt, reading it, that he was looking at a photograph of generosity rather than generosity itself. That the number 847 meant nothing to him in the way that a face would mean something, that he had, without meaning to, built a machine for caring so that he himself would not have to feel what caring actually felt like. He told no one his plan. Not his driver, not his assistant, not his wife. His wife, Gloria, had died 4 years earlier of a cardiac event at 57, and he had never fully reorganized his life around her absence. He told the head of his security detail only that he would be unreachable for 30 days, and that if there was a genuine emergency, a medical emergency, a company crisis above the threshold they agreed on, the man could use the number he gave him. Otherwise, 30 days. He took 500 naira in coins, the agbada from the back of his wardrobe that he had worn once at a fundraiser 7 years earlier, and had not touched since, and a pair of worn slippers that had belonged to his late driver. He left Banana Island on a Monday at 4:00 a.m. and walked until the sun came up, and kept walking. He kept a small notebook, the kind that costs 30 naira at a roadside stationery stand, and a stub of pencil he had found on the ground on the third day. He wrote in it each night, in the dark, by feel. The street has a logic that is not immediately visible from a car. He had driven through Lagos for 40 years and had thought he understood it the way a man who has read a map understands a city. He did not. The street has its own administration, who occupies which corner, how that occupation is defended, what the unspoken hierarchy is, who extends credit in the form of a shared meal, and who expects repayment, and in what form. He learned all of this slowly, and at some cost. He lost his first night's positioning on a Surulere sidewalk to a man named Sunday, not through confrontation, but through the quiet establishment of a prior claim Emeka had not known to respect. He spent that night sitting upright against a perimeter wall with his knees to his chest, and he understood by morning that his back was not the only thing that would hurt. By the fourth day, he had learned the names of 11 people who slept within a 3-street radius. He had contributed nothing to their lives yet. He had no food to share, no skill that was useful to them, but they had taught him the timetable of the street. When the day workers arrived, when the rubbish truck came and what it left that could be used, which market woman sometimes left a wrapped portion at the end of the day for whoever was nearest, which security guards looked away, and which ones did not. A man named Tobena, who appeared to be around 50 and who had a scar that ran from his left ear to his jawline and who never once explained it, shared a meal with Emeka on the 5th day without being asked. It was a small portion of iba and okra soup in a black polythene bag. He handed it across without ceremony, the way one passes something at a family table, with the assumption that, of course, you will eat. Why would you not eat? This is what people do for each other. Emeka ate it. He wrote in his notebook that night, "I have never received something with less attached to it." He did not know who I was. That was the whole point. He had not expected to feel ashamed. He had expected clarity, perspective, the kind of renewed gratitude that a man of his means was supposed to collect from experiences like this and carry back to his real life like a souvenir. Instead, on the 7th day, he felt something closer to grief, a slow gathering recognition of a distance he had traveled without a map and could not easily measure. The grief had a specific texture. It was not about the discomfort. The discomfort was manageable, or at least it was narratable. The back pain, the hunger, the noise at 3 a.m., the smell of himself by the 3rd week. What the grief was about was harder to name. It was about the quality of invisibility, the particular way that people who had walked past him his entire adult life, the way people walk past men on the street, the studied non-looking, the slight acceleration of the step, the eyes going deliberately to the phone screen or the middle distance. He now received that from people who had sat across from him in boardrooms, from people whose children had eaten at his table. On the 11th day, a woman stopped and gave him 50 naira. She was perhaps 35, carrying a child on her back and a bag on her arm, and she stopped not because she had time to stop, but because she had seen him and something in the seeing had made the stopping necessary. She had very little, he could tell this from everything about her, and she gave 50 naira and then she was gone before he could find anything to say. He wrote in his notebook, "She had less than anyone I passed today. She was the only one who stopped." He had 3 children. His eldest, Adaeze, was 34. She ran the Foundation's Community Programs Division. She had designed 2 of the 3 programs herself, and she had her mother's specific way of listening, which was to go completely still and not interrupt. and wait until she was certain you had finished before she said anything at all. She had always had this quality. He had always been grateful for it, and had never once said so directly. His second child, Dubem, was 31. He managed the Western region operations for Okafor Group, a position he had earned over 8 years of genuinely good work, though the fact that his name was Okafor had never, in Emeka's private accounting, been disconnected from the opportunity. Dubem drove the black Mercedes. He wore the watch. His youngest, Nkechi, was 26. She was completing a master's in public health in London and called home every Sunday at 6 p.m. and had asked her father, the last time he had spoken to her, what he was working on, and he had said he was doing some thinking and she had not pushed. He had not told any of them about the 30 days. He had said he was traveling for research. He had used that word, research, and his assistant had arranged a plausible calendar of meetings in Abuja that would serve as cover if anyone checked. He had not thought, constructing this cover, about the possibility that Dubem would have reason to be on Bordeaux Road on a Thursday afternoon. Lagos is a large city, and they did not move through the same parts of it. But on the 19th day, Dubem was on Bordeaux Road, and Emeka was sitting on the cardboard, and the distance between them, the 3 feet of open pavement, the 1 second of eye contact, the adjustment of the watch, the door closing, was 30 years of something Emeka had never examined, because there had always been something more pressing to examine. He wrote nothing in the notebook that night. For the first time in 19 days, he left it closed. If this story is already settling somewhere specific in your chest, stay with me, because what Emeka does with what he has seen is not what anyone expects. He completed the 30 days. He did not end the experiment early because of the Thursday on Bordeaux Road. He had said 30 days, and he had meant 30 days, and if the experiment had to be continued by a man who was carrying something heavy, then it would be continued by that man. He was, if nothing else, someone who finished what he started. He had said this in all 3 magazine profiles, and at least in this it remained true. On the 30th day, at 4 a.m., he called his driver. He was taken directly to the house on Banana Island. He showered for 22 minutes. He ate, carefully, smaller portions than he wanted, because his body had reorganized itself around scarcity, and he knew from nothing except instinct that overwhelming it was not the right way back. He slept for 14 hours. On the 32nd day, he called Adaeze. He did not tell her everything. He told her enough for her to sit across from him at the table in the Banana Island kitchen and go very still, the way she had always gone still when she was listening, and not interrupt for 12 minutes while he spoke. When he finished, she said, "How many nights?" He said 30. She looked at her hands. Then she looked at him. Then she said, "Did anyone know you?" He said, "One person. A man named Tobena, on the 5th day." She said, "How did he know?" He said, "He didn't. He just gave me food because I was hungry." She was quiet for a long time after that. Then she said, "That's the whole thing, isn't it?" He said yes. He did not call Dubem. Not yet. He wrote in the notebook instead a longer entry than any he had written during the 30 days, written at the kitchen table at 6 a.m., with proper light and a real pen. He wrote what he had seen and what he had understood and what he intended to do. He wrote the name Tobena. He wrote 50 naira from a woman carrying a child on her back. He wrote the look away, the watch, the door. He did not write Dubem's name. He didn't need to. The notebook knew. What followed was not swift. He did not summon his board and deliver a speech. He did not issue a press release about his transformation. He had done enough reading of his own public record to know that a story about a billionaire who spent 30 days homeless and emerged enlightened was exactly the kind of story that the world would receive as a performance, particularly from a man who had already told 3 magazines that he never lost sight of where he came from. He acted, instead, in the manner of someone who understood that action is different from announcement. He called Tobena through channels that took 11 days to navigate: a former street contact, a community liaison, a neighborhood elder who knew the geography of that Surulere corridor, and when he found him, he offered him work. Not charity. Work Tobena turned out to have been, before a sequence of events Emeka did not ask him to detail, a qualified electrician. He now led a small maintenance crew within the Okafor Group's facilities division. He arrived at 7:45 every morning and left at 4:30. He had not been late once in 4 months. The woman with 50 naira he never found. He tried. He left a description with the community liaison and waited 3 weeks. Nothing came back. He thought about her more than he expected to. He made a donation. In her approximate name, he called it the 50 Naira Fund, internally, which made his finance director look at him with a specific expression, to a maternal and child health program in the Surulere area. It was not enough, and he knew it was not enough, and he did it anyway. He restructured the foundation. He dissolved the quarterly report format and replaced it with a system in which every program director was required to have a personal relationship with at least 12 beneficiaries, not a statistical relationship, not a file number relationship, a face and name relationship in which the director could say, without looking at a document, something specific and true about that person's life. This was a Daisy's suggestion. She had thought of it in the 14 minutes between when he stopped talking and when she said, "That's the whole thing, isn't it?" She had been holding it quietly since then, waiting to be asked. He called Dubem in December. He did not tell him he had seen him on Bourdion Road. He did not raise it as an accusation or a test result. He called him and asked him to dinner and sat across from him at that same kitchen table and talked. Not about the company, not about quarterly targets, not about the things they always talked about when they talked, about his mother. About what she had been like when Dubem was 9, the way she listened without interrupting, the way she could identify when a person in a room was uncomfortable before they knew it themselves. Dubem had not talked about his mother in 4 years. Emeka had not asked him to. They sat at the table for 3 hours. The food went cold, and nobody moved to warm it. At some point in the second hour, Dubem said, "I don't always know how to be what you need me to be." Emeka said, "I know. I didn't make it easy." This was the most honest exchange they had managed in 11 years. It arrived not because Emeka had confronted his son with what he had seen, but because he had gone quiet enough, finally, to hear what his son had been carrying. The Thursday on Bourdion Road was never mentioned. Perhaps it did not need to be. Perhaps the distance it represented had already begun in that kitchen, with cold food and an honest sentence to close. On a Tuesday in February, at 6:14 a.m., Chief Emeka Chukwuemeka Okafor walked into the Okafor Group offices in Victoria Island carrying the notebook. He set it on his desk. He opened it to the first page. The first page said only, Day 1. "I have 500 naira, and I have not yet been hungry." He had written the second part with a faint awareness that it would not stay true. He had been right. He turned to the last page he had written, not the 30th day, but the 32nd, at the kitchen table with proper light, and read what he had written once more. Then he picked up the phone and called the head of his HR division and began a conversation that would, 6 weeks later, result in the implementation of what became known internally as the Dignity Standard. a set of policies governing how the company's security personnel, reception staff, and facilities team were trained to interact with every person who entered an Okafor Group building, regardless of appearance, regardless of the hour, regardless of the purpose of the visit. The policy had a single organizing sentence, which Emeka had written himself, and which appeared on the first page of every training manual. A person walking through this door does not owe you a reason to be treated with respect. The training program was mandatory for all 2,300 employees. It began with a story. Not his story. He did not put his own story in the manual, because that would have made it about him, and it was not about him. It was Tobena's story. Tobena had agreed without hesitation when Emeka asked him. He had said, "Tell it right." Emeka told it right. There is a version of this story in which a wealthy man goes to the street and comes home grateful and changes nothing and tells 3 more magazines how it changed him. That is not a rare story. That version of the story exists in abundance. This version is different not because of what Emeka discovered about Lagos or poverty or the street. He already knew those things in the way a person who has read about a country knows it, in outline, at a distance. What he discovered was smaller and more specific, and therefore more permanent. He discovered what he looked like when his son did not know he was looking. He discovered what his company's lobby felt like to a person who arrived without a name anyone recognized. He discovered that a woman with very little can give 50 naira to a stranger and not look back, and that this act, small as it was, had lodged in him more firmly than any amount he had ever written on a check. You can build a system for caring. You can construct a foundation, a fund, a quarterly report with 847 in it. None of it will teach you what you learn the day someone hands you something from the last of what they have and asks for nothing and keeps walking. The hardest thing is not to change after that. The hardest thing is to change in the right direction, not toward gratitude that flatters you, not toward the story you tell about yourself at the next profile, but toward the small, daily, unannounced work of seeing people clearly and treating what you see with the weight it deserves. Emeka kept the notebook. He kept it in the top drawer of his desk, beside the pen his wife had given him on the day he signed the first Okafor Group lease. He had never told his children about that pen either. He was going to start telling people the things he had never told them. It was a small beginning. He was 61 years old, and it was not too late, and the notebook in the drawer was proof that even the things you should have known for 30 years can still arrive on time. If you discovered tomorrow that someone in your family, someone whose values you believed you knew, had walked past you on your worst day without stopping, would you want them to know what they missed, or would you find another way to close the distance? Leave your answer in the comments. I want to read it. Subscribe to African Empire Folktales, stories about hidden strength, quiet power, and the people the world overlooks until they change everything. I'll see you in the next one.